Hello, everybody. MJ Schwab here again. We are going to go away from the Viking Age because, well, newspapers. They didn't even write, let alone, write or read newspapers. That's not how they got their information to diffuse. But newspapers are interesting, and what we're going to do is we're going to, of course, go away from the Viking Age and go to um, modern times. We are going to go to World War II history, uh, and particularly American analysis of the days before World War II, before the um war activities uh, commenced. And so we have four, actually three really good examples of that. Two from the Baltimore Sun, one from the Washington Post, and one from the New York Times. And so we, it's a part of the World War II history that I really enjoy. Is the lead up to it, um, the interwar period in between World War One and World War Two. But particularly, I really like the 1930s, from 1932 on. So just before Hitler took over, and then just after he took over. So really from midsummer, mid-late summer of 32 to sometime in 34, when Hitler was able to finally um, get rid of all the parties and take over pretty much completely. The Enabling Act came in there, and of course, eventually the death of President von Hindenburg meant that he was able to take the Fuhrer role. What I like about newspapers is you get a step by step, primary source documents. Now, of course, you have opinions, you have analysis that enters into it. So, what exactly was true was something you just had to, and news was happening quickly. Things were happening in Germany very fast. In the United States here, we had a new president. Roosevelt was enjoying his first term. And of course, we were going through um, a financial crisis, the stock market crash, of course, and all the jobs lost because of that. And people got their information from the newspapers. These were important primary source documents, whether they were true or not. Like I said, excuse me, they would be opinions or analysis, and they could be wrong. And of course, there'd be differing ones too. But to see what was going on at this time in a step-by-step thing, that was great. What I'd like to do first is a headline from uh, the 21st of July, 1932. Now, this is, of course, before Hitler takes over. The analysis of this newspaper, of course, it's the Baltimore Sun. They figured that it was going to be a military coup eventually. Kurt von Schleicher, who was the defense minister, he would eventually be chancellor after. This is during the time of the end of Heinrich Brüning, who was the chancellor, who was an economic type of chancellor. And then you had a military political person by the name of Franz von Papen, who was currently chancellor. Von Schleicher would take over for him, and of course Hitler would take over for him. But the analysis, and this was a lot of the analysis at the time, was that von Schleicher would be the guy with the power. And this is what this says. The interior minister had left, and he said, and a lot of the people of von Papen's government said they would leave only if machine guns were pointed at them. Of course, that's what von Schleicher did. So at this point, even though he wasn't chancellor yet, von Schleicher held the power. And it looked at this time that President von Hindenburg was basically okaying a military coup. And so this is what we wind up going into, how Hitler can take charge. In fact, when von Schleicher became prime minister, he told the president that they wouldn't be able to put down revolts by both the communists and the Nazis. But then at the end, he told him, yeah, we can put it both down. And of course, that ended it for von Hindenburg. He fired him and brought in Hitler. Of course, that's how we got to that point. The other three newspapers are concerning Hitler taking charge. You see, in the February 1933, all the parties, political parties, are still around. The Catholic Center Party, they're starting to make concessions. What they would ultimately do, we find that out in the very next entry. This one being February 7th. The next one's a March entry. Is that the Catholic Center Party, von Pappen's party, and some of the it was a Catholic party. It was a religious party, and they that was the big problem. Is especially with von Papen. He was, as vice chancellor, was arguing with Hitler about that, about the religious implications of the things that Hitler was trying to do. Of course, you start to see that the communists are gone by March 23rd of 33, and this was the paper, New York Times actually, for this one, and so you started to see that quickly from January to March, and all of this is spelled out in the newspapers, and of course the one from the Washington Post, which was June of 34. That's when von Papen, of course, made his spectacular speech about Hitler and the issues with religion and religious freedoms being ended. So all this is spelled out over several months, and it's a really neat way to get your primary source history. Thank you.